Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. My name's Don, and this channel is all about fishing. I used to say it was all about bass fishing, but I talk about everything that swims, so there's no telling what I'm going to talk about next. Today, I thought I would kind of reach back and, you know, talk a little bit about type of fishing that I haven't done for a long time, and a lot of you out there that you probably do this all the time, but for me, it was quite an experience back then when I was a teenager growing up. Um, and it was catfishing. Uh, it's an incredible way to fish. I know we have big cats down here. I catch them from time to time, especially if I'm drift fishing for crappie or bluegills. There's a lot of big cats down here. I don't know, what type they are. I think they're probably channel cats or maybe blue cats, but catfish is an unusual species. And, I've never spent a lot of time trying to catch them. I've eaten them. They're great eating. Uh, I don't know how safe it is to eat the ones that we catch down here in Florida because of the mercury. They are bottom feeders, so any of this mercury that's in our waters and our lakes definitely falls to the bottom, and I would think they'd be pretty heavily laden with, high content of mercury. But maybe the ones that we buy in the store or you buy in a restaurant are much safer. I have no idea. But this video isn't about eating catfish, it's about catching them. So let me take you back to when I was probably 16, 17, 18 years old. We had an unusual childhood. It was all about fun. We had to go to school just like everybody else, but my days were filled beyond school. My days were filled with either baseball, football, basketball. We even in the wintertime, we even played hockey at a small little ice skating rink that we'd set up just for, ice hockey. But we would play any sport, ping pong, horseshoes, you name it, we probably played it. We even played a crazy game called quates. And I'll bet there aren't many of you out there that know what that is. If you're from Pennsylvania, you might know, because it's a little rubber circle that's filled with lead that you're throwing kind of like horseshoes, and you're throwing it up on a piece of slate with a post in the middle. It's an interesting game, and we used to play it all the time when I was growing up. But the one thing that we did the most was fishing. And we hunted. Hunting was number two. We did a lot of hunting. And even back when I was, 8, 9 years old, I thought I was hunting anyway. I was out there with a BB gun. I was willing to shoot mountain lions or anything else that we might run into. But fortunately, that never happened. But one of the things that we used to have fun doing, and this is back really before I had a boat, it was those growing up years where you're just rebelling against everything. And I tell you, I had a couple of buddies that they were pretty much up for anything. And I would go out with them and with my younger brother, Bill. And, sometimes there'd be as many as 6 or 7 of us. But we raised all kinds of hell. We were always going somewhere. I was the first to get my driver's license. And as a result, don't you just love these phones? Anyway, I was the first one to get a driver's license, and I had, I don't even know if my dad gave it to me or if I bought it. I don't even remember, but I had a 59 Buick. And this was way back in probably 60, I don't know, 64, 65, somewhere around there. I was just, a little past 16, so, whatever that math figures out to. But because I was the only one that could drive, I would go places and we'd load up the car with guys. And, it was against the law for any of us to be drinking back in those days. But we could always buy beer. We never had trouble buying beer and cigarettes anytime we tried to buy them. Most of the people that had these little wine shops, we called them, they knew who we were and they didn't hesitate to sell them to us. But if they did, and I don't remember a case where they did, but if they did, I'm sure we could have found somebody a little bit older to buy it for us. But we were allowed to drink beer in Ohio. If you were 18 years old, you could drink what they call 3-2 beer, and that's all we needed. We get plenty drunk on 3-2. But what we would do that was so much fun is on the weekends, like Friday, school would let out. We'd get all our boys together and we'd load up the car with our fishing rods and our sleeping bags, and we'd make sure we picked up a couple cases of beer and made sure we had cigarettes, and we were all bad boys. I'll admit that. But back then it was just something we did for fun. But we'd head out to one of the lakes that we didn't fish very often. A lake that I don't think to this day, I don't think I ever was in a boat on this lake. But it was a lake called Springfield Lake. And again, you may know where it is in Ohio. If I had to pick it out on a map, I'm not sure I could. But that's where we'd go, and we'd head out about 6 or 7 o'clock in the summertime. Well, early summer, late summer. I know we still had school, so it had to be either early in the year or later in the year. But we'd head out on a Friday or Saturday night, and with every intention of just fishing all night. And we'd bring our sleeping bags and that because eventually we'd probably doze off. But what we do is we made sure we had plenty of night crawlers, because night crawlers was the bait of choice. And I'm sure we probably could have caught the catfish on something else. We probably didn't even know what stink bait was back then. Nowadays I see it advertised. I've seen it up at Bass Pro Shop, some of the other places I've gone. I've never used it, but I'm sure it's effective. But night crawlers were our bait of choice. And we'd get out there and we'd rig up our rods, and it was a simple rig. It was just a big sinker with a hook. That's all there was to it. And we'd get out there about an hour before dark, and we'd scrounge around and we'd find some small branches and we'd whack them off, and we'd make these little V-cut sticks that we could put in the ground, and then we could put our rod. We use it as a rod holder. Just stake it up on the ground there. And we had 2 or 3 spots we fished from, but the one spot that we favored was really kind of hidden away, but it had a nice sandy area. And so it was perfect, to camp out there and build a big fire and just sit around and tell stories all evening and drink beer and wait for that first catfish to bite. So by the time it got dark, we'd all be in the water. And we only had one rod each, so it wasn't like we put 50 rods out there. We all had one rod, and we baited it up, casted it out, put it on one of those forks, and came back to the fire and popped a beer and just started bullshitting with everybody else. And we would tell ghost stories, and we just screw around all evening. And usually by midnight, sometimes 1 o'clock, the last of us would just drift off. We'd all kind of fall asleep. It never failed. It seemed like it was always around 2 o'clock in the morning. And one of the guys would get up to pee, and he'd just start screaming and hollering, "Hey, man, your rod's going in the lake." And everybody would jump up and come down, and all of a sudden, all the rods are moving, and we started catching catfish. And I mean, you'd catch one catfish after another. There were nights I think we caught 30 or 40 catfish, and they were big. I mean, they were probably 3 to 5 pounds, 6 pounds, good sized fish. And when you're catching that many, invariably you got lines crossed, and we'd almost, without exception, somebody would break their rod. Somebody would lose their rod because they weren't paying attention, and the catfish just took off and the rod went with them. But by the end of the night, we'd all be exhausted. We'd be we hadn't slept long enough to really have a hangover, but we'd be drained, and we'd have this mess of catfish. And my buddy's mother used to love fish. She didn't care where they came from, but she loved fish, and she particularly loved catfish. And we throw all the catfish together in a bucket, and we take them over to her house and give them to her. And she'd always give us a batch of cookies or something. But to be honest with you, we were we were under the weather just enough that we didn't really want any cookies. We were all ready to go home and just, take a little nap. And that's how the day ended up, or the morning. But it was a great time. And we used to do it. My God, we must have made 30 or 40 trips doing that. And it was so, from the time I was 16, probably until I was probably 16 and 17. I don't think I was any younger, but I don't think we did it too much after 17. But maybe. Uh, all I can remember though is we just had a lot of fun, and those catfish were fun to catch. So, maybe you've done something like that. If you have, leave a note in the comments down below. Share your story. Uh, but if you enjoyed the story, give me a thumbs up, and please subscribe to the channel. Got a lot more great stories coming up. So thanks for joining me today, and I hope you have a great day.